So, you did manage to come after all.
My dear Watson, I don't promise lightly. I even have the confetti, you see? And I have to offer you my most hearty felicitations.
My dear Holmes.
John!
Just leave me for your wife who calls.
John!
Yes, I should.
Your only selfish action in our whole association that I can recall.
But give you time, eh?
Mr. Holmes!
Mrs. Watson, sincerest congratulations on this happy day.
Thank you, sir. I know my husband would have been sorely troubled not to have seen you.
Shall you be coming to the wedding breakfast, Holmes?
Alas, no.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
A case?
John?
Well, we shouldn't keep the carriage waiting.
Yes, I relish the chance to practice my throwing action.
My love. We shall see you on our return then, Holmes.
From your honeymoon? Where are you going?
We must expect you, Mr. Holmes, to deduce that for yourself.
Bon voyage, Watson! Mrs. Watson!
The Blanched Soldier by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, dramatised for radio by Roger Danes, with Clive Medicine as Sherlock Holmes and Michael Williams as Dr. John Watson, and featuring Hannah Gordon as Mrs. Watson and Robert Glenister as James Dodd. The Blanched Soldier.
I thought you said the corps was over that way, Baldy.
Yes, so I did. Don't seem to be now, though, do they, Simpson? Some way behind us, I reckon.
Booked it back to Pretoria and safety, I shouldn't wonder. Anderson,
Corporal?
take a turn back over our tracks. See if you can find them. Tell them to get a move on. The enemy isn't likely to wait about for us to catch him up.
No sooner said than done.
Down, Simpson! Get down!
Can you see them?
Not a thing. Kruger's friends know this broken veldt ground too well.
Tell that to Anderson. He knows it by now. Too well.
We'll lose the horses in a second if we don't move quick.
You'd be mad to chance it, Emsworth. If we keep to cover, we can wait till the rest come
Wait for the enemy to pick us off at leisure? Not likely, Baldy. You with me?
Brave man. You go first. I'll give you a covering fire.
All right. Good luck.
Yeah, good luck yourself.
Here goes nothing, then.
They say there are two stages. The first is when one fears what's going to die.
Breathe deep now.
The second, when one fears one's not going to die after all.
Try to watch the horizon.
John, I can't even see the horizon.
I'm sure I saw Cap Greenay just then.
Don't try to cheer me up. I just thank goodness the rest of our European tour will be by train.
Are you sure you wouldn't prefer to lie down?
Oh, no, John. No, John.
You're not doing too badly, you know. Even some of the crew are looking a bit green.
If you can't find anything more helpful to say...
I'm sorry. It won't be too long now.
You cannot be long back from South Africa, Mr. Dodd.
No. No, sir, a matter of a couple of months.
You had a satisfactory war.
That is, I survived it, Mr. Holmes.
You were in the Imperial Yeomanry, I perceive.
I was, yes.
Middlesex Corps, no doubt.
You must be some kind of wizard, Mr. Holmes.
On the contrary, I've lately been active in the exposure of a charlatan shaman of the utmost depravity.
The Turkish business, I read of it.
Yes, the newspapers favoured my involvement with their usual lack of accuracy.
Your own, though, sir, is astonishing to me. You see everything.
I see no more than you, Mr. Dodd. I notice what I see, that is all. You have a tan upon your face that an English sun could never give, a handkerchief carried in the sleeve instead of the pocket. With your bearing, that marks you as an army man.
So the late war gave you South Africa, I see that.
Not the kind of a riding man, but your beard shows that you were not in a regular regiment. And as to Middlesex Corps, your card here has already told me that.
In what way?
You're a stockbroker, sir, from Throgmorton Street. What other regiment would you have joined? And so, what's been happening at Tuxbury Old Park?
This is clairvoyance, Mr. Holmes.
Well, no doubt I could make you believe that, were I so unscrupulous as the Sultan Shaman, but there is no mystery. Your letter was on headed writing paper from Tuxbury Old Park.
Of course.
And by the pressing terms in which you wrote, it was clear that something both sudden and important had happened.
By God, sir! You have made a most damnable intrusion into the privacy of my family.
Colonel Emsworth, I am sorry
The
that
matter
you should
will
take...
not bear discussion. You were here, Mr. Dodd, as a guest in my house. You abuse my hospitality and have become a spy upon my family.
That is less than justice, Colonel.
Indeed it is, sir. And you shall leave as soon as there is a train. Oh, damnation, there's none tonight. Believe me, if there were, you would be on it.
I regret you should misconstrue in this way.
There is a London train at 8:30 in the morning. The trap will be at the door at 8.
I want you to know, Colonel Emsworth...
I have nothing more to say to you, sir, save that I have no wish ever to see you again.
I have no intention of being intimidated, sir, by anything you may say or do. You call me a spy. It is you who have made me so, by lying to me.
If I see you here after tomorrow without my leave, I shall be within my rights, Mr. Dodd, if I use violence.
I warn you. I shall get to the bottom of this.
And I warn you, sir, come back, and I'll shoot you. By God, I will!
He's a hard nail, is Colonel Emsworth.
The Crimean VC.
Yes, the greatest martinet in the army in his day. And it was a day of rough language, too.
And so he kicked you out.
That was what it amounted to. I can tell you, Mr. Holmes, I couldn't have stuck him at all if I hadn't been there for Godfrey's sake.
Perhaps you care to explain?
I'd got into the way of supposing you knew it all without being told.
Even I cannot work without the facts, Mr. Dodd.
Well, then. You were quite right, of course, that I'm lately from the war in South Africa. Godfrey Emsworth was my mate almost from the moment I joined the squadron. My mate. That means a good deal in the army.
He is Colonel Emsworth's son?
Only child. The same fighting blood as the old man, too. We were the sort of pals who... Well, you can only be that when you share the same joys and sorrows. When you're mates, really.
Go on.
The Boer gave us a year of hard fighting. Then one day there was an action by Diamond Hill, outside Pretoria.
Here goes nothing, then. Come on, boy. Like the wind. Simpson! Simpson!
Bullet from an elephant gun.
And you?
I wasn't there. Godfrey and a couple of others had gone on ahead of us. Got lost, I don't know. Brother Boer was waiting for them anyway.
But Emsworth wasn't killed.
Oh, no. I had a letter from him, from the hospital in Cape Town. Then one from Southampton when he'd been shipped back home to England. But since then, Mr. Holmes, never a word. Not for 6 months and more.
And you can see no reason?
Mr. Holmes, he was my closest pal.
Bellamy. We could see that this evening.
What is it, John?
It's, a theatrical spectacle.
I did manage to construe that from the poster.
It's from Maupassant's novel.
Wasn't that meant to be rather daring?
Not for Paris.
I think I'd rather not, John, if you don't mind.
Tea, then? There must be somewhere close.
I don't know. We seem to be a little out of the way. But then, having seen all that we have, I don't really know where we're meant to go next.
It looks as though if we just go a little further down here, see?
The Quai des Orfèvres. Is that where we are?
Yes.
I wondered why we just happened along here. And that building is it. Is it?
I merely wanted to see.
Can I really have married a man who would sniff when he viewed the Sacré-Cœur and call the Eiffel Tower clever?
Well, it is.
And this man would then walk half across the City of Light in order to gaze upon the Central Criminal Police Station.
It is a very famous building, you know.
Sean.
Ah, no. Mr. Sherlock Holmes has got a lot to answer for.
Well, he's your friend.
Yes. But you're my wife. And that's a cafe. Come on.
I take it was not at Colonel Emsworth's invitation that you went to Tuxbury Old Park.
No. Godfrey's mother. She's a gentle little white mouse of a woman. Sent me a quite amiable reply to my letter to her. This was after the old curmudgeon of a father had spiked my guns on my first advance.
You wrote to Colonel Emsworth first?
Certainly. I observed polite convention, as you would expect. When the war was over and we all got back, I wrote to Godfrey's father and asked where and how my closest pal was. I'd been meaning to do it for 6 months, after all. But I got no answer.
You're certain the Colonel received your letter?
Oh, yes. It was pure discourtesy on his part. But I half expected that from what Godfrey had said of the old man.
Father and son did not always agree.
Hardly ever, I should say. Godfrey had far too much spirit to stand the Colonel's bullying ways. I waited a bit, and then I wrote again.
This time you had a reply?
Short, gruff. Godfrey had gone on a voyage round the world, not likely to be back for a year.
That was all?
Well, I wasn't satisfied, Mr. Holmes. Godfrey wouldn't drop a pal like that. The whole thing seemed damned unnatural.
So, you wrote to my wife, sir?
I was going to be in the neighbourhood, Colonel, on business.
In the neighbourhood? When we're 5 miles from anywhere? You surprise me.
I have business in Bedford, sir. I thought I have a certain amount of interest which I might tell Godfrey's mother, of our shared experiences in South Africa.
Oh, yes. We have, of course, only your word for that.
I have Godfrey's letters to me, sir.
On your person, sir?
In my pocket, sir.
Kindly let me see them.
Do you not find it natural, Colonel Emsworth, that I should wonder at Godfrey's sudden silence and his return to England? Or that I should wish to know what has become of my friend?
I have some recollection that I've already corresponded with you, sir. That you already know what has become of my son. His health was in a poor way when he returned from the Cape, having been gravely wounded in an action at which his solicitous friends were not present.
That is less than fair.
His mother and I were both of the opinion that Godfrey was in need of complete rest and change of air.
And that is the reason for this voyage around the world.
As you have been informed already.
Why, so I have, Colonel.
I would be obliged, sir, if you would have the extreme goodness to pass on that explanation to any other of his closest pals who may be interested in the matter.
Certainly I shall do that, Colonel. Perhaps you would be kind enough to let me have the name of the steamer on which Godfrey has sailed, together with that of the shipping line and the date of his departure, so I may have the opportunity of getting a letter through to him.
Mr. Dodd, many people would take offence at your infernal pertinacity.
You must put it down to my very real love for your son.
Nevertheless, your insistence reaches close to the point of damned impertinence.
Am I to take it that you will not tell me where Godfrey is?
I will tell you this, sir. Your meddling can serve no useful purpose.
Perhaps I should be the judge of that.
Drop these inquiries, Mr. Dodd.
Clearly, you do not intend to heed the Colonel's advice.
Would you, Mr. Holmes?
Perhaps not.
No, perhaps about it in my case. I vowed from that moment I'd never rest until my friend's fate had been cleared up.
And you cast that in Colonel Emsworth's face?
I hope I'm better as a friend than as an enemy, Mr. Holmes. No, for Godfrey's sake, I knuckled under for the time being. And eventually the Colonel accepted he couldn't really throw out a guest his wife had invited fair and square to stay the night.
Well, he has some social graces then, at least.
But it was a dull dinner we had that evening, I can tell you. Mrs. Emsworth questioned me eagerly enough about her son, of course.
But you learned nothing from her?
Not with the old man present at table.
How did the Colonel react to your stories?
Depressed. Morose. To be honest, I think he hardly listened.
Yet you were speaking good of his son.
For a time. But I made an excuse to get to bed as soon as I decently could. My room was on the ground floor. Large, bare, and as gloomy as the rest of Tuxbury Old Park.
I've brought you a fresh supply of coal, sir.
The old butler, Ralph. He seemed about the same age as the house itself.
And that is?
Elizabethan, mainly. Mind you, his wife was probably even older.
Yes, sir. You should be more comfortable now, I hope. It's bitterer weather tonight.
I know. There was no trap at the station. I walked and froze.
Oh, dear. All the way from town. And these rooms are cold.
Oh, don't worry. Most of us Cape veterans are in pretty rude health. I'll take no chill.
It might help to close the curtains, sir. These big windows.
No, don't. Thank you. It's a fine night, and I like a moonlit garden. Reminds me I'm back in England, Ralph. Home and safe.
If you don't mind my asking, sir.
Far away.
I couldn't help hearing what you said of young Master Godfrey at dinner.
It's good to have an appreciative audience.
Well, you may know my wife nursed him when he was a young lad.
Certainly. I've often heard him say she was second in his affections only to his mother.
Oh, that pleases me to hear, sir. So you might say from that I'm in a way to be his foster father.
It's natural you should take an interest.
You say Master Godfrey carried himself well, sir?
By God, I do. Once, he pulled me right from under the Boers' rifles.
He was always courageous.
Just as well. Or I can tell you I shouldn't be here now. There wasn't a braver man in the whole regiment.
Nothing would ever stop Master Godfrey, sir. There's not a tree in the old park he hasn't climbed. He was a fine boy, Mr. Doyle.
I can well believe it.
And you're the witness, sir. He was a fine man.
You speak of him as if he were dead.
I don't know what you mean.
You say he was a fine man. What do you mean by that? What is all the mystery, Ralph?
You will have to ask the master that, sir. He knows.
Look here. For I'm going to ask you plain. What has become of Godfrey Emsworth?
It's not for me to interfere. Good night, sir.
Now listen. You'll answer me this one question. If I have to hold you here all night...
Please let me go, sir.
I must know. Is Godfrey dead?
I wish to God he was.
He ran from me, Mr. Holmes. I was in no very happy state of mind.
Oh, God help him!
I thought it plain. My poor friend had got involved in some criminal endeavour. At the least, something which touched the family honour. So badly that that martinet father of his had sent him away.
Could you believe that of him?
Godfrey was sometimes easily influenced. I feared he might have fallen into bad hands, been misled to his ruin. But I knew my duty to him. I spent some time pondering how to proceed. I was anxious, restless. I got up.
Godfrey!
And there he was, my friend, standing before me.
Dear heaven! Godfrey!
Ah, your problem begins to present some very unusual features, Mr. Dodd.
He stood outside the window, his face pressed against the glass. I thought he was a ghost. But then, his eyes met mine, and then I knew him for a living man. His face held my gaze. What a change, Mr. Holmes. He was so deathly pale.
Ill, you mean?
No, worse. Shocking. I've never seen a man so white. He sprang back.
He saw you looking at him.
I suppose so. Then he vanished into the darkness quicker than thought.
Athletic, then?
As ever he was. But slinking, furtive, somehow guilty. And that ghastly face, glimmering as white as cheese in the darkness. Mr. Holmes, I had known Godfrey as a frank, manly lad, my fellow corporal. But now...
You followed him?
I didn't wait about. When you've been soldiering a year or two out in the Cape Province, you learn to keep your nerve and act quickly. Even so, I wasn't as fast as I should have been. There was an awkward catch on the blasted window. Godfrey! I went the way I thought he must have gone. It was a long path and the light wasn't very good. Godfrey! Is that you? Wait, man! Wait for me! I thought I saw something moving ahead of me, so I tried to follow that, but... Godfrey! Oh, it's no good. Damn it! When I got to the end of the path, it split every which way, to any number of outhouses all over the park. Get the breath now. Hold it. I heard it distinctly. And it wasn't from the house behind me either. I knew then what I'd seen, Mr. Holmes. No vision. No ghost.
And the door you heard close?
That was one of the outhouses. But which one? How could I tell?
What did you do then?
Well, what more could I do in the darkness?
You went back to your room?
And I spent an uneasy night there, I can tell you. Next day, I practiced my wheedling arts upon the old colonel. He was less than keen to allow me another night's imposition upon his hospitality.
But you persuaded him?
I had to enlist Godfrey's mother to intercede for me. The old curmudgeon gave in to her eventually. Though it was touch and go, I should say.
Once it was agreed that you should stay, did they leave you to your own devices?
Yes. Mrs. Emsworth remarked there were some places of interest in the neighbourhood. So I strolled out that morning in search.
And you found what?
I found I got no further than the end of the garden, Mr. Holmes. There was one lodge there of some size. For a gamekeeper or a head gardener, it might be.
Inhabitable, then?
Well, it seemed a likely place to start. I strolled up carelessly. And then, there was this man.
Not a gardener?
Not at all the gardener type, Mr. Holmes. Small, brisk, bearded, black coat and bowler hat. Good morning to you, sir.
Are you a visitor here, sir?
Certainly. A friend of the family. Well, in particular, a good pal of Godfrey Emsworth. Army chum, you know.
Ah.
A pity he should be away on his travels.
Quite so.
Yes, shame. He would have been more than glad to see me.
No doubt you will renew your visit, sir?
No doubt.
I hope at some more propitious time.
I've heard that tune better hummed. He never took his eyes off me as he went away, Mr. Holmes. To me, he looked frankly guilty.
Did you manage to get a close look at the lodge from which this man emerged?
So far as I could see, it was empty.
So far as you could see?
Well, that is, the windows were heavily curtained and I couldn't see in. I didn't want to spoil my own game by being too audacious.
Certainly not.
And I did notice the man was watching me.
He had something to conceal?
I thought so.
And is this when Colonel Emsworth ordered you off the premises?
Later. In the meantime, I went on with my inquiries.
You continued to defy your host's expressed wish?
Yes, I did.
Excellent.
I waited till night. Once the old park was quiet, I slipped my window catch and went back to the mysterious lodge. I was in luck this time. There was some light, breaking through a crack in the shutter.
A fire?
Blazing merrily. A bright lamp.
And the bearded gentleman in the bowler hat?
He was sitting opposite me, smoking a pipe, reading a newspaper.
What paper?
Well, I really took no notice.
You took no notice?
Well, no. Can it matter?
Mr. Dodd, it's essential.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. All is not lost. Possibly you observed if it was a broad-leaved newspaper?
Now you come to mention it, it wasn't large, no.
Of the kind one associates with a weekly press.
It might have been the Spectator.
Ah, thank you.
What really struck my attention, Mr. Holmes, was the second man.
Godfrey Emsworth. Well, there's no point in your tale.
Yes. Leaning upon his elbow, his body turned towards the fire. He seemed in the utmost melancholy.
You're certain it was Emsworth?
He had his back to me, but I've sat around countless Veld camp fires with that man. I can say I knew him, Mr. Holmes. And then there was a sharp tap on my shoulder, and Colonel Emsworth beside me.
And you, on the next available train back to London.
Oh, this air. Fresh like...
Mountain spring water?
Mountain something, anyway.
Mountain air, in all probability.
Oh, and the views, John.
Marvellous place for a sanatorium.
Yes. Yes, it would be. But I'm not sure your practice will ever be able to support that sort of thing.
Besides, you wouldn't really like to live here, would you?
Cuckoo clocks, trees, and St. Bernard dogs.
Mercenaries and the Red Cross.
And those funny chalets with the gentleman and lady who tell the weather. No, a honeymoon is one thing.
A fine thing.
A wonderful thing. But London is for the rest of our lives, isn't it? We have to allow time to build up the practice, after all, and then to reap the reward of it.
Yes, no retirement for me, unlike some.
No bees.
I find my powers undiminished, mind. Rather the contrary.
Well, I have not been disappointed.
It can be a thankless business, investigation.
That's why I have turned to you, Mr. Holmes.
Well, you were right to do so. I'll go back with you to Bedford, I think.
Colonel Emsworth has expressly forbidden me to return.
I've been shown the door at many a better place than Tuxbury Old Park, Mr. Dodd. And I'd be interested in seeing how bellicose is the Colonel after I've had a word with him. Now, you say there are only 2 servants in the house.
To the best of my belief, the butler and his wife.
And no servant in the detached lodge where you believe Godfrey Emsworth's hidden.
Well, unless the little man with the beard. But he seemed to be quite a superior person.
Yes, and that is very suggestive.
Of a mystery, it seems to me.
Had you any indication that food was ever conveyed from the main house to the lodge?
I did once see old Ralph carrying a basket down the garden walk in that direction.
Yes, you've gathered together the essentials of the puzzle with great astuteness, Mr. Dodd.
Oh.
You'll be happy to hear the matter presents few difficulties in its solution.
Yes?
I'll meet you at 9:05 on Monday morning. It's in Pancras Station, in plenty of time for the down express to Bedford.
Oh, Mr. Holmes! I'd begun to think you'd missed the train.
In you come, then.
My heavens, Holmes! Do you always cut it so fine when you take a train?
My friend Watson would tell you, gentlemen, it's my habit never merely to step onto a stationary train, nor if there's a moving one in the vicinity.
Oh, then this gentleman is not Dr. Watson. Alas, no, sir.
Oh, my colleague and biographer has, I regret to say, deserted me for a wife. No, this is an old friend of mine from before my days as a consulting detective.
Mr. Dodd, I am glad to meet you.
It's possible the journey may prove entirely unnecessary to him.
Well, I wish you'd mentioned that, Holmes, in the first place.
On the other hand, it may be absolutely essential.
You say you saw your friend's face quite clearly at your window, Mr. Dodd.
Well, his nose was pressed against the glass, and the lamplight from my room shone full upon him. How much clearer would you like?
You see?
I'm prepared to accept that it was indeed him, but you say he was changed, sir.
In colour, yes. His face was... I don't quite know how to describe it.
White as cheese, I think you said?
Yes, almost. A kind of fish belly whiteness. It was bleached.
You say fish belly white, like scales?
Well...
You see, no difficulty, really.
You didn't notice his hands by any chance?
No?
Pity.
Look, gentlemen, if you have solved this mystery, I'd be grateful that you should let me know. I've hardly slept for a week for worrying about Godfrey.
Well, to be candid with you, Mr. Dodd, there remain 1 or 2 details to be cleared up.
Details?
The most interesting parts of the case, sir, are always the details.
Worth the journey?
I should say so. Oh, the noise, John.
There's quite a number of tourists stop by here nowadays. It's by far the most spectacular fall.
John,
What?
do you know that gentleman?
Who?
There. He seems to know you.
Oh, I don't think so. Damned impudence of the man.
He must be foreign. Waving like that to a stranger.
We are the foreigners, my dear.
Dr. Watson? Dr. John Watson, is it not?
That is my name, monsieur.
And, madame. Enchanté.
Monsieur?
I should be glad to know, sir, how I may have made your acquaintance.
We share a profession, you could say.
I am a general practitioner.
Of course. And you are here for your honeymoon.
You seem to know a lot about us.
Chère madame, it is my vocation to know about people.
If you are unwilling or unable to explain how you came to be following us, sir...
I am a pèlerinage, a pilgrim, you could say.
Why in the world here?
To see with my own eyes the famed Reichenbach Falls.
The Reichenbach? John?
Which your husband, madame, has done so much to make famous.
These are the Reichenbach Falls?
Yes.
To see where my admired confrère struggled with the infamous professor. To fall, apparently, to the death of both of them.
Did you think I wouldn't find out?
I was about to tell you.
It is the most wonderful place, Doctor.
Do you think I would mind?
And it is exactly as you have described it. I can hear you now cry, Holmes! Holmes!
Holmes! I wanted to lay a ghost.
And there was no answer above the water's roar. Ah, it was brilliant. Oh, and by chance to meet you, Doctor.
Oh, John.
You could say my happiness is complete.
You are too good, sir.
Oh, I forgot. My car. Doctor, chère madame. And so, goodbye. Goodbye.
Au revoir. Who was that? John? What is his card?
Dear goodness.
I'll wait, Holmes.
We'll send for you.
Don't want to be a burden, you know.
He means he wants to sleep, Mr. Dodd.
Good morning, sir. Why, Mr. Dodd?
Ralph, this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the consulting detective. We wish to see Godfrey Emsworth.
If you will have the goodness to wait one moment, gentlemen.
Do you garden, Ralph?
I beg your pardon, sir.
Your gloves?
The code.
Of course.
If you would care to step into the hall.
Thank you, Ralph.
I will inform Colonel Emsworth of your arrival.
Thank you.
That should be interesting. Oh,
Mr. Holmes, your hat.
I can write my own clumsiness, thank you.
Just you get the old Colonel, Ralph, will you?
By God!
Mr. Dodd, Colonel.
Did I not tell you you are ordered off the premises, you infernal busybody?
And Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
At your service, Colonel.
Damn your service, sir. Ralph, telephone the county police. Tell the inspector there are burglars in the house. Did you call me thief, sir?
One moment, I have to warn you, Colonel. Any police interference would bring about the very catastrophe you so dread.
Ralph!
If you'll permit me.
What the devil are you waiting for? Ring up the police at once. Tell them if not thieves.
Now, this, Colonel, this is what has brought us here.
How did you know this?
It is my business to know things. My trade.
Why, Godfrey, old man. This is fine.
Don't come near me, Jimmy.
What? This is very sudden, Colonel.
These gentlemen forced our hand.
Keep your distance.
It disarranges all our plans.
Can't be helped, Mr. Kent.
No, gentlemen, it can't. Nor should it.
You may well stare.
Well, what do you expect of me?
Not quite the smart lance corporal you knew, Jimmy, am I now?
What in heaven's name is the matter with you?
It's why I don't exactly court visitors. Mr. Kent here has been my only constant companion.
Keeper, you mean?
The only thing I keep, sir, is this young man's secret.
Until now.
I saw you at my window, Godfrey.
I shouldn't have done it. But old Ralph told me you were staying at the house. I couldn't help taking a peep at you.
My friend.
How did you come to this condition, Mr. Emsworth?
Here goes nothing then. Come on, boy. Like the wind. Go on.
The Buffel-Spruit skirmish.
Godfrey was hit.
Galloped several miles before I finally fainted. Fell off the saddle.
We thought you'd been killed.
It might have been better. By the time I came to myself, it was night.
And cold, I'll warrant.
That kind of numb cold. Deadly. Sickening. I roused myself up, and then I saw this house, close behind me. And weak and ill as I was, I dragged myself to it. My only hope. There was a big room, several beds in it, like a barracks.
And so you slept?
Lucky to survive so far.
When did you wake?
Morning. And instead of coming into a world of sanity, it was as if I'd wakened into a nightmare. I was in a great, bare, whitewashed dormitory. There was a man in front of me. Small, dwarf-like, with a huge, bulbous head. It was his hands. He was waving them about in excitement. Horrible. Like brown sponges.
Deformed.
It is often thus. But how can that be? Godfrey?
He wasn't alone. Behind him stood a whole group. Seemed intensely amused at it all. Oh, but not me. For not one of them was a normal, whole human being. Every one of them was twisted, or swollen, or disfigured in some awful way. And their laughter.
My God.
Yes. It was a leper hospital, Jimmy.
And you?
And I had slept in a leper's bed. Don't touch me, Jimmy.
My God.
I hoped against hope. But I was not to escape. As you see.
And so you conspired to avoid the consequences.
Segregation for life, amongst strangers. Never a hope of release. Sir, this is my son.
You may say I was lucky.
Lucky?
I was home, in this lonely house. We had Ralph and his wife as our only servants, whom we could utterly trust. This lodge where I could live. And Mr. Kent here was prepared to stay with me.
Under pledge of secrecy. But so much now for that.
My God. And will you then, Godfrey, be dragged to your doom? All through my determination to seek you out?
Oh, you're not to blame, Mr. Dodd.
I would not have forced your hand thus, Colonel Emsworth. When I wrote, rather than spoke, the word leprosy, it was to indicate to you that my discretion could be trusted. And who knows, but good may come of this exposure.
How can any good come of it?
May I ask, Mr. Kent, if you're an authority on this complaint?
I am a surgeon, sir. I have the ordinary knowledge of the educated medical man.
I don't seek to doubt your competence, sir, but perhaps you may permit of a second opinion.
If you have a specialist in mind.
But look here, if this second opinion forces us to segregate, Godfrey, I'd rather not have it at all.
You need have no fear of that. In the carriage is waiting a friend of mine, a specialist in the field of tropical disease, in whose discretion you may trust as completely as in my own. You may have heard of him, Mr. Kent. Sir James Saunders.
Heard of him? The most distinguished...
So that's who he is.
Oh, I shall indeed be proud to hear his advice.
Please ask Sir James in, Mr. Holmes. Our secret is out in any case. What greater knowledge can hurt us now?
Well, well. So, you met Monsieur Jules Gervais at the Reichenbach Falls. One of my professional rivals, Mrs. Watson.
One of many.
But a good one. On pilgrimage, eh?
We all were, Mr. Holmes, though we didn't necessarily know it at the time.
You flatter me.
No, Holmes. We merely render unto Caesar.
Well, I wrote some good things of you, didn't I?
Let us see, shall we, since you now feel you can do without me to the extent of becoming your own biographer.
An experiment, Doctor. You've urged me to do it often enough.
Page 1, a companion to whom the future is always a closed book.
You missed limited ideas there at the beginning.
Yes, but exceedingly pertinacious just afterwards, and you entirely ignore all the good things I put down about you.
You certainly failed to mention that I should have diagnosed a case of leprosy right away.
But you were not here, my dear fellow. That's the point.
To indicate it was not leprosy after all.
Ichthyosis. I can recognize pseudo-leprosy as well as Sir James Saunders and Holmes here.
On page 44, in strides the great dermatologist to reveal that Godfrey Emsworth has merely a benign skin complaint, a deus ex machina, surely.
A literary device of long and stainless pedigree.
Even so, were I a critic, I should say you skim rather lightly over the explanation of your deductive process.
If I do that, it's because there's no more to be said.
Your readers expect it.
Your readers, John?
Precisely, Mrs. Watson. My readers do not yet exist. Well, what putative expectations, Doctor, would you have me satisfy?
You could have made more play of your other theories.
My dear fellow, there was no credible alternative.
It's possible Godfrey Emsworth could have been in hiding for a crime.
But in that case, what crime? And why would the family not have sent him away, as they claim?
That voyage round the world would have been quite the thing.
Very well, but the madness theory?
Well, it's more plausible, yes. There was the presence of Mr. Kent as a sort of keeper.
And he did keep the lodge door locked.
Yes, but no superintendent of the insane would be so lax as to allow his charge to get loose like that, to come down at night to have a look at his friend.
And so you are left with the theory of disease.
Of a kind for which the authorities would enforce segregation.
I would have been helped enormously had Mr. Dodd been able to tell me what was the paper he saw Kent reading. The Lancet, say, or the British Medical Journal would have been conclusive.
Well, I should have said leprosy from the moment Mr. Dodd mentioned the whiteness.
Quite so, Doctor. The indications of the bleached skin, however, were enough to alert even me, and I confirmed my suspicion immediately upon my arrival at Tuxbury Old Park.
The pantomime with your hat.
Yes, there was a strong smell of disinfectant. It came from the gloves old Ralph had just taken off.
What? To avoid contagion, you mean?
Certainly. It was quite unnecessary, of course, as Sir James was at once able to confirm.
And shall you publish your narrative, Mr. Holmes?
I think not. I am compelled to admit, having taken the pen into my own hand, as never before, I am a great admirer of my Watson.
So am I, Mr. Holmes.
In The Blanched Soldier, Sherlock Holmes was played by Clive Medicine and Dr. Watson by Michael Williams, with Hannah Gordon as Mrs. Watson and Robert Glenister as James Dodd. Colonel Emsworth was played by Derek Waring, his butler Ralph by John Woodnutt, Mr. Kent by Gordon Reed, Sir James Saunders by Gerald James, Godfrey Emsworth by Nicholas Bolton, Lance Corporal Simpson by Tom Bevan, Trooper Anderson by Peter Kenny, The Leper by Don McCorkindale, and Monsieur Jules Gervais by Olivier Pierre. Other parts were played by members of the cast. The violinist was Leonard Friedman. The Blanched Soldier was dramatized for radio by Roger Danes and directed by Enid Williams.